I think let's kick off the session as we let the others trickle in. So hi, everybody. Good day to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today as we explore why great companies with great solutions are still vulnerable to attacks and breaches. I'm very excited to have our Silverfort CISO, Paul Cunningham, to share his insights on how you may get ahead of this conundrum. And during this session, this is about a 30-minute tech talk. During this session, if you have any questions, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box. I will alert JP to address these questions. So JP, take it away.
Thank you, Alvin. Well, good morning, everyone in Asia. I just actually got back from Asia in September on a little speaking tour, and I'm actually getting ready to head to the Middle East and India here this next month to do some of the same. So very much enjoyed my time there, and just very much appreciate that you've joined me today to listen to a perspective of an old CISO, so I'm really happy to be here to talk to you. As Alvin said, I've entitled the presentation "Why," and it is going to be that question because I think it's the foremost question that we have to ask ourselves as security professionals. It's one that I've often asked myself as a CISO, as I've thought about how I approached security and strategy and tools and building security programs. It's certainly something that I think is interesting to me, and hopefully today it'll be interesting to you. Just a little bit about me. I've been a CISO for over 10 years. Before that, I was the chief security architect at JP Morgan Asset Management. We had about $3 trillion in assets there that we protected, and I had a global role deploying security everywhere, including Asia. So I've been around for a while, and I've gotten to write and speak on cybersecurity and try to get back to the industry wherever I could. Certainly, these are just my opinions. In fact, they are my own opinions. They're not even Silverfort's opinions, even though I am Silverfort CISO. This is just how I've looked at it, more and more as a CISO, and where I think the biggest issue is. And so what is that great question? What is the why that I think we need to ask ourselves? It's Alvin framed it. It's why do great companies, after deploying many security tools, and they have amazing staff that they've employed, why do they still get breached? Because we see in the news all the time these great, powerful companies, often they have bigger budgets than any of us have, and they still get breached. And you say, well, why? What's the common thread? What's the thing that's causing this? And I'm going to try to answer that. Now, before I answer it, or before we move any further, I will say there's not just one answer, for sure. There's a lot of things that we all are struggling with. I mean, we've got a hybrid environments, cloud, on-prem. We've got pool fragmentation. We've got identity fragmentation. We've got just a very complex world out there that we're trying to deal with, and all of that contributes, I think, to why companies get breached. But I do think that there's one core element, one core thing that we kind of put it on the back burner. We kind of put it on the back burner, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that as we kind of get through this in more detail. So what are we going to try to do today? We're going to try to talk about that common thread of breaches. We're going to talk about why some of the tools that we've deployed just aren't enough. They aren't able to stop these types of breaches. And we're probably even going to go a little further than just talking about the tools. We're going to talk about the architecture. I'm an old architect at heart. I didn't go too far into my detail, but I actually started out as an architect. I was developing, I was doing infrastructure. I rose to the rank of chief architect. It started to write all the strategy and those things, but I can never put that architect behind me. So when people ask me, are you an operator or a builder? I'm a builder. And so I'm always thinking about kind of how we can do it again. So we'll talk a little bit even more fundamentally about where we went wrong, or why we need to reprioritize how we think about some of our budgets and our deployments and what we're doing. So again, what can we do? We'll try to answer that question. I don't want to just leave you with the problem. I hopefully will give you some ideas on things that we can do. And I added some stuff in here too, just my experience working with boards and management. If you're a security professional, if you're trying to get something through, it could be to your boss, it could be to senior management of your company, it could be up to the board level. What are some strategies and things that I've used to help sell security? And so hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end just to kind of give you a little insight of a tried and true CISO that had enough failures that he found a few successes and a few ways to get those budgets in there. I always like to have a little bit of humor, I wish it was this easy. The cartoon just says, our devices are now 100% secure. And he's like, how did you do that? How did you make it secure? I just turned them all off. Of course, if we turn them off, we probably have a real big problem, like ransomware is across, going everywhere. We got to shut everything down. That would probably be pretty bad. But unfortunately, cybersecurity has never been that easy. But I thought that was kind of a cute little humorous cartoon. So here's the deal. This is the state that I think probably most of the people on the call are in. You've done well. You've been investing in a lot of technologies. You've got the endpoints covered. You probably maybe have some threat management coming in. You probably put MFA at least on the edge. In your cloud, the initial login, right? You may have a SIM if you're lucky or unlucky, but that's another topic for another time. Privileged access management, you started to think about how do we lock down or vault these identities. So you've been working through the problem, and I think a lot of us, probably felt pretty good, and a lot of the companies that get breached feel pretty good because they say, "Look, we've done a lot." And there's some fatigue even in the management teams. They're saying, hey, we've funded so much of this security thing. Why hasn't it stopped it, right? So is it enough? Well, I mean, the empirical evidence is definitely it's not enough, because every week somebody's getting breached. Somebody's in the news, and they're not just small companies that didn't have the budget or the staff. They're great companies with great staff and great budgets. So, I just like to look at some of the statistics, and, these are just cherry picked because there's a lot of statistics out there, but, you have 81% of the hacking breaches, involve some kind of identity compromise. The ransomware is using identities, credentials are always being, looked at and stolen. You've got the non-human identities, you've got the human identities, all of these, identities that float around our environment are certainly one of the things that is a kind of a common thread with all of these events. And you can look at some of the breaches that have happened, like the Colonial Pipeline was a very big one in the US. And why was it so big? Well, it was a ransomware attack, but it attacked critical infrastructure in the middle of winter, heating oil that had to go to the northeast of the United States, where they use a lot of heating oil to heat their homes. And could the pipelines move the oil? Could the petroleum move? It was a pretty big deal, and so there was a compromised VPN. There were weak passwords. So SolarWinds, involves stealing credentials to get into the supply side or supply chain attacks. The bottom line is it's pretty common. It's pretty common that you see kind of this identity thread. And so, we're starting to kind of hint that maybe this common thread, maybe this common issue is identity, but it's going to be just wait for it. It's going to be more complicated and more interesting, I think, than just saying identity, because that might be just a little easy. But as we kind of look at it, there's a lot of things that go around our tools. We've got privileged accounts, we've got service accounts, these non-human identities that are flowing through our organization. We've got shares that are open on our networks. We've got admin interfaces. We've got these low-level interfaces that float into our environment. And hackers love them. And in fact, they use them, as you can see here in this chart, because they're normal. They look normal. They don't trigger EDR flags. They don't, trigger alerts a lot of times in your SIEM because they look normal. They look like just normal activity that maybe IT staff would do or the environment would do. Yet you see that these interfaces and these lower level things are also a big threat and a big exposure to us. And the question is, have we really protected them? So this is Uber, but I could write any name here. At Silverfort, we do a lot of research into events when they happen. We have a lot of great threat researchers and security researchers that really get in to understand when there's a threat out on the internet or working, and we often kind of digest it. And I see this pattern all the time. And as an architect, I was always looking at good patterns and bad patterns, right? And this pattern exists, and it may change just a little bit, but what happens? Somebody gets a credential. And as much as we've tried to prevent them from getting credentials, we do MFA, we do, try to harden the MFA, we try to do passwordless, we try to do YubiKeys. I've got a few YubiKeys laying around here. The bottom line is they're still able to compromise the attack or the identity. Maybe it's social engineering, maybe it's a vulnerability, but they get the identity. And I don't know about you guys, but I used to think, and I still do in a way, because that once they got that identity, they were done. There was nothing that they could do. And in many ways, that's what happens is once the identity's captured or co-opted by either an insider or an outsider, there's not very much that stops them. There's not very much that stops them. They basically go through the environment. They go to unprotected servers. They breach their PAM. They move laterally through the network, and eventually they've got everything they wanted. And even if they don't get anything, they've got your reputation at hand, because who wants to be in the news to say, "Hey, we breached, Silverfort. We breached them." Whether they got anything or not wouldn't be the issue. So let's pivot just a little bit and let's start to kind of analyze if we're starting to talk about identity. I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about is people being a weak link. We often say they're the weakest link. In fact, another little humor here. We've narrowed down our security risks to two groups of people: everyone that works here and everyone that doesn't. So essentially saying people are the big threat. But, and it is true, right? It is true that people are often, subject to social engineering. They can be fooled. But it's not always the people accounts that are getting breached. I mean, it's also the non-human accounts, the machine accounts. There's no human involved there, but they still get breached. These low-level interfaces in some ways are machine level and system level things. And I think it's, I've kind of begun to think that, this is too easy for us as security professionals to blame the people. I think we have to look harder at what can we do. Because certainly there are issues here. There's, weak passwords, inadequate access controls, a lack of identity verification, those kinds of things. There's also vulnerability issues it's always been hard for us as security professionals to get all the vulnerabilities patched, to make sure that we do it. And we, throw in a lot of, technology out there. Probably a lot of people on this call, if not everybody, probably has some form of a password vaulting in your environment. It might be a formal PAM. It might be, some kind of password manager, but you're doing something to try to protect those passwords from being accessed, from being captured. But is PAM enough? Well, I mean, if you go back to that earlier slide with the gate, yeah, everybody's got PAM, but they're still getting breached. And why are they getting breached? I mean, why is PAM not enough? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have PAM, and if you've implemented PAM, that's awesome, because it is a piece of the puzzle. But PAM solutions are very complex, and they don't always integrate well. There's a lot of training that has to go on and process that you have to build into your organization. Well, I'm not going to even say think. We over rely on PAM, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. In a couple of slides, I'm going to bring this together and kind of talk about the fundamental problem of why these things aren't really working for us and stopping these breaches. But there's a lot there that has to go on with PAM, and PAM's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to, still social engineering and insider threat and credential hacking and session hijacking. And, it's difficult to do the monitoring, effectively, when people are using it. Storage, that supports the PAM can be unsecure. There could be vulnerabilities in PAM. So PAM alone, while a good technology, and I'm not, if you've invested in it, that's great. I'm not saying don't at all, but it's not enough. And you say, well, hey, I did MFA. I got MFA. I checked the box. Multi-factor. I've got YubiKeys in my organization, or I've got, everybody's got a phone now, and they do MFA. Is that enough? Well, I have to ask, where did you deploy MFA and how did you deploy it? Did you just deploy it on the initial login and then you cache it for 12 hours, 15 hours, 24 hours, forever? Is there ever another MFA challenge ever in the day for the users? Is there, MFA challenges based on where they go and what they access and what they do? Or is it just on the edge? Is it just there to try to protect that initial login or protect cloud from being, hijacked by some, group in Nigeria that's, trying to do MFA or mail hijacking, right? So, even if you've got MFA, well, so did all the companies that got breached. They had MFA, but they still got breached. So MFA at the very initial login wasn't enough. Just putting it there. You might have done passwordless authentication. Passwordless is cool. It's got some benefits. There's some cool things you can do. You can do certificate based, but it's still vulnerable like all these other things. So what's the issue here? I mean, if you think about like all these things, we've got so many threats. What can we do? What is the issue? What is the fundamental issue? What did we miss when we were putting our programs together? This is a slide I think that kind of brings it together. This is my premise. This is why I think companies are getting breached. We've put all of our effort into with identity, security, or the products that we tried to protect identity with, PAM and MFA and all these other things, education, phishing. We put all the effort on trying to prevent the identity from ever being gotten, to stop it from being hijacked. Stop them from, give them an extra factor so they can't just guess the password or steal the password. We're trying to stop it at the pre-authorization level. But that's not where these breaches are happening. They're getting past that. No matter what we've done, they're getting past that. And then it's a wide open game. It's the post-authorization, the zero trust stuff that we talk about, but nobody seems to quite understand what it means and how to implement it. That's where the real breach impact happens. They get past all this. It's like we block the front door. We put a good lock on it. We put cameras on it. We put surveillance on it, but they're already in the door. They're already in the house, and they've got free access to go to any room. They're not getting any extra challenges when they go to the bedroom or to the kitchen. There's no surveillance. They're able to just kind of move, throughout pretty unimpeded, and they move laterally, and then they get whatever they want and they get out. So I think that's really the fundamental problem. It's kind of the yin and yang of identity. We've gotten one of it, but we're way out of balance on the other. And for presentation, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail about what can we do. And ultimately, there's going to be a challenge for all of us in the industry of what I think we need to do. So what are some of the key strategies to improve identity security? Well, if you think about that post-authorization issue and why everybody's able to move pretty freely once they get through that initial access control, whether it's PAM or MFA or whatever, we've got to get control of the things that are going on in our environment. Because of the cloud, because of the hybrid environments, because of all this integration with SaaS, we've got a ton of non-human identities and service accounts. We've got a ton of integrations, because it's not just that we buy a SaaS product, but that SaaS product needs to integrate with our HRIS system, and it might need to integrate with our identity system, and it may have to integrate with who knows what, right? And so you build all these integrations, and all it becomes very convoluted, and we create all these service accounts. And as a CISO, I've always been scared of service accounts. I'm afraid of them because I don't know, they're overprivileged. I assume they are. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know where they've really been used. I don't even know necessarily how many I have or what was created before I got there, because they're all over the place. So it's a really big issue for us. And we've got to look at our identity security. We've got to do better monitoring of the human and non-human identities. We've got to understand the risk factors and the things that should set off alarms, and maybe even start to think about just-in-time entitlements and risk-based entitlements, that it's not just a permanent grant of entitlements, but that it changes based on the situations and conditions that are going on. We've got to, still build out and work out these weaker protocols in our environment that get used all the time in ransomware attacks and other things that flow through our environment. These are identity protocols, but they're less secure. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I've gotten rid of MTL M1," and then you see that they haven't, because they're being used in all the Internet of Things and all these other things that we put on our networks. And you've got to implement MFA everywhere, but not just MFA. So because MFA is the granting of access, you need to implement denying of access. You've got to do it after that initial login. I want to go to my HRIS system. I get another challenge. I'm a domain admin, and I want to get into the M&A folder on my network. I get a deny. Even though I'm a domain admin, I should have access to everything. I'm a global admin. I get a deny. So we've got to be able to put these additional segmentations and additional steps and additional challenges. So now that when I'm in the front door, everything's locked to me. And every place I go, I'm being monitored. And every place I'm going, is it really you? I'm going to check to see if it's still you. Are you really supposed to be in my house? So these are the kinds of things that we have to begin to look at from a security perspective. Again, more surveillance, more training. We've got to move away from this traditional phishing training, sending out a phishing email. That's not how people are getting breached. We've got to talk about social engineering. We've got to talk about the text to your phone. Now we've got to talk about the Zoom call with the CEO or CISO. It's me, it looks like me, it sounds like me, but it's not me. That's what we've got to start training our people to do. We've got to, think about using AI. We've got to, update our plans. We've got to modernize our incident response plans and continually test them and continually implement them to figure out what we want to do, how we want to respond, how will we do it. Something that I've written about and talked about a lot, and I'll probably do maybe a follow-up next quarter on this in more detail, but we need to do identity microsegmentation and segmentation. We did a really good job of talking about network segmentation, over the last 5-10 years. Do network segmentation, but what we did? We created an identity that breached that had access to all the network segments. So if I get control of the identity, there's no network segmentation because my identity can go everywhere. So we've got to think about what we did with network segmentation. We've got to do it with identity segmentation and really get down to almost that micro level of identity of how we do it, and limiting the scope of an identity, limiting the reuse of identity, and really truly achieving the goal that we wanted to achieve when we did network segmentation with identity segmentation. That is the real key. That will stop these things like ransomware attacks, lateral movement, those kinds of things. It does reduce your attack surface. It puts those checks and balances. It implements the true kind of principles of zero trust, and it will help you get to that place. There are some cool things that are happening. I know we're about 30 minutes in now, so we're starting to get to the end, but not quite. But we've got probably about 5 or 10 more minutes here. But artificial intelligence, it's definitely a benefit. Everybody's got it. If you think you're going to control AI, you're not. I often call AI like it's the ultimate shadow tech. Shadow IT. Everybody's got it. They've got it on their phones. It's integrated in every application. And now the real challenge is for companies to really do the diligence on all these vendors to really understand what they're really doing with AI. And are they really learning and really not learning? And just what are they doing with it? And I think it's going to change how we think about third-party diligence. It's a whole nother topic, but there's a lot of benefits here. Machine learning, there's blockchain, extended reality. I think is going to come into fruition as we see kind of the virtual world, the extended world where we're blending the real world and virtual world in one interface for us. Zero proof knowledge proofs are really cool, and homomorphic encryption. Just think, today we pass all the keys around. What if we never had to pass a key? What if I could prove who I was without giving you anything? That's what these technologies are all about, and they have a lot of pluses for identity and how we think about identity security. But is it the answer? I think we've got to, when I think about AI, it has a lot of potential, but it's still very new. It gives a lot of times the wrong answer, but it's not just giving the wrong answer. Here's the problem. We've got to train our people and retrain our people how to ask the right question. How to ask the right question. Because you could ask a question like, give me a piece of code that, calculates the, present value of money, and it will get a piece of code. But if you ask it to give you the present value of money, but you want it to have, good inputs and output validations to ensure that, only the authorized inputs can come in and only the authorized outputs can go out. And I want to have a log exit. I want to, you could get a whole nother set of code that'd be much more secure. And so we've got developers that are out there using AI, asking these simple questions, but are they getting secure code or are they just getting insecure code? It's a real problem. And so I think we've got to, begin to train people how to to ask the right question with AI. I have this in my deck, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you want to know more about it, there's a lot of sources here that you can look up, homomorphic encryption and zero knowledge proofs. As I kind of mentioned, it's essentially the way to validate your identity without revealing anything, without sharing any codes, any tokens, without decrypting the packet. And I think that has a lot of promise as we think about identity. Because one of the problems that we have is just that we have so many identities and that we pass them around and there's no one identity that represents you. If we could get to that world where you had a single identity for every system versus multiple identities for many systems, then we could begin to and we could protect it. We could, I think, begin to, tackle this synthetic identity, fraud, and the other things that happen, when it comes around identity. But we need to make identity great again. It's the political world. I call it MIGA, but we've got to make it great again. And so this is a challenge. This is a challenge. If you believe what I said about we haven't fixed the post-authorization identity, that we've left the doors wide open after you get through the front door. If you believe that, well, the problem is, and if I was to ask you, if I had the chance to ask each of you, I said, where is identity security on your budget? Where is it on your strategic plan? I think a lot of you would probably tell me it's not on there or it's really low. It's really low because we thought that after we did MFA, after we did PAM, that we solved the problem, that we'd solved the identity security problem. So the challenge that I'm presenting to you today is you haven't. That's why people are getting breached. But there are things you can do, and there are products out there that can help you do those things. And I'm challenging everybody to put it back at the top. Put identity security back at the top of your strategy, back at the top of your budget. And that's not self-serving because I work for an identity security company. It's not. It's because as a CISO, I truly, truly believe that until we tackle this problem and until we fix it, we're just going to keep getting breached. And you're not getting breached because you're good. You're just getting breached, you're not getting breached because you're good. You're not getting breached just because you're lucky. But that luck's not going to last forever, and we've got to be able to solve this problem as a company, or industry, as a group, as professionals. So the last part of my slide is about how to sell it. Okay, so now I'm challenging you. I'm saying, okay, now you got to put identity security back at the top of the list. How are you going to sell this to skeptical boards, skeptical management who think that they've already solved the problem? So these are like my top 10 things of ways that you can, sell to the board. And I'll try to be quick, but we'll make this available to you guys so you can see it. Quantify the risk. Quantify the risk, but do it in this way. Do it in the concept of risk appetite. And we talk about sometimes risk appetite at the board level, but that's essentially how much risk do you really want to take? How much money are you willing to spend to solve a problem? How much money how much reputation are you willing to put on the line? Because if you can break the appetite even down from just medium level appetite, if you can break it down and start to say, hey, we don't have the controls, we have all these risks, and we're way above our appetite, we're way overexposed, you can begin to get people to kind of think about it in business terms. And that's the other thing, right? The next one, talk about it in business terms, talk about how to affect our customers, our ability to sell, how it could impact our revenue or our bottom line. Because we often make mistakes of trying to be too technical with boards and management. Make regulations your friend. There's a lot of regulations, a lot of privacy regulations, and financial regulations depending on which industry you're in, insurance. You can use these things to kind of help make the case. Hey, there's a regulation here. We get fined by the regulators if we don't do this. You can talk about MFA that way. You can say, well, yeah, we did MFA, but we didn't do it everywhere. And the regulation really expects us to do everywhere. And why do we do it everywhere? Well, that's why everybody's getting breached. I just listened to Cunningham give this presentation about why companies get breached. They're getting breached because we haven't done it everywhere. Talk about return on value. It's really hard to talk about a return on investment because it usually isn't one, but talk about the value that you're going to get back. Use real industry benchmarks. I've written about this, I think in Dark Reading or something else recently. I said we got to throw out this whole like notion that IS security teams need to be 10% of the IT budget or 10% of the IT staff. Those are pointless. Those are meaningless. You need as much money and as big a staff as you need to protect what you have. That may mean that you have a security staff as big as the IT group. It may mean that you have one smaller, right? But you gotta stop thinking about it in like these just big nebulous benchmarks, and do what I did. I formed like networking groups with my peers, with my when I was in the private equity world, I had all the private equity CISOs meeting with me monthly. We would share how much we were spending, how much our budgets were. Because a lot of times you can go to the board and say, well, hey, our biggest competitor is spending X and they have a team of this size and we don't, that tends to have a lot more weight because they don't want to be, way behind their competitor. They don't want to be behind their peer group. Don't, keep focusing on the people, do risk management, measure, don't forget to put measures and metrics in. Figure out how you're going to measure it and come back to the board and prove that you did what you said. Tell them that you're going to be accountable. Show them that you're going to be accountable. And I think the biggest one is number 10, which is build a relationship. Who on the board is your best friend? Who in the management team is your best friend? Because if they can advocate for you, that you're going to be far, far better off. And invite them to your security steering groups. Set up a monthly meeting with them. Talk about your strategy. Talk about what you want to do. Get their insight. Help them translate it to the management team or to the board or wherever you're trying to sell. Get somebody to be on your side, because if you can do that, you're going to be very successful. These are some of the regulations. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but again, there's a lot of regulations. India, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, all throughout Asia, and all throughout the world, there are regulations that support, identity security. So I'll leave you with this. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's by an old football player, Jim Rohn. And he said, there are two types of pain that you'll go through in life: the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. Discipline, that pain, weighs ounces. It's hard, it might hurt a little bit, but it doesn't hurt very much when it's compared to the pain of regret. And think about that, right? Your users might not like that they get an extra challenge. They might say, man, I just want to log in once and be done. I don't want any more challenges. I don't want it to be denied. I don't want to have to go through any other hoops. But that little extra effort, when I get into my box file sharing, getting that extra challenge, may stop you from getting breached. And that little bit of pain they had to endure and you had to endure to make it happen is going to save you in the end. This is my motto that I live my life by, and it was given to me by a wise CEO a long time ago. So as I wrap, I'm not here to sell Silverfort, but Silverfort plays a big role in this post-authorization world. We're not the only vendor, and there's other vendors that complement what we do also. But if you're really serious, if you really want to look at how to protect this, how to really implement zero trust, how to get control of your non-human identities, your service accounts, how to put both extra MFAs and denies, like a privileged access control, into your environment on a policy base and do it all through an agentless interface, we can help you a lot. So with that, 42 minutes in or so, 40 minutes in, that's it. That's the premise.
JP. We have two questions in the Q&A box. So let's dive into the first question. where the attendee had asked, based on your earlier comparison, organizations focus security on the front door as the only entry point for identity access. How else will identity be accessed if not going through the front door?
Well, so the issue, the front door is important, because it is true that most of the time you have to go through a front door unless you've got an insider already there or you're already inside, which does happen. You might get inside through a vulnerability. You might get inside through a favorable insider that actually helps you get inside. Disney saw that. So there is merit to protecting the front door, but again, if you follow my premise, if you follow the premise, everybody's getting through the front door. We're not going to stop them getting through the front door. And so if we put it aside and we say, yes, there may be ways to get around the front door entirely and coming through a back door with a vulnerability or something else, but most of the time you're going to go through the front door, but they're going to get through. And so now what are we going to do once they have that identity? Once they're inside the environment with a live identity, how are we going to stop them from moving? How are we going to stop them from getting to their goal? That's the whole premise of zero trust in a way, but we haven't ever really thought about it or implemented it properly in the way that we need to think about identity and identity security. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, you're not going to stop them at the front door. And we've always talked about like this theme of identity or defense in depth, but we kind of missed the boat when we did identity. Again, we put all of our effort to make harder passwords, longer passwords. I've got 15-character passwords, by the way. I implement them everywhere I go. Passphrases, by the way. MFA, tokens, right? Security tokens and passwordless and all these things. We've done all these things. PAM is just another example, trying to vault our passwords and keep our passwords from getting accessed, our identities from getting access. Change the password every time so it doesn't get access. But yet, almost every breach, they usually get access to passwords that were in the vault. And by the way, you can't always change the passwords because they're service accounts and they'll break everything. And you've got all these other challenges. And so somebody writes them down and somebody puts them somewhere. So there's all these, unfortunately, just all these things that happen that make the I don't want to say the front door is irrelevant, because it's not. It's still important. But if you don't do both the front door and everything inside after the door, you miss the boat and you're going to get breached. And that's why companies get breached.
Thanks, JP. So there's the follow-up comment, if you will, right, in the Q&A where the attendee had said that, so Silverfort's value proposition is added security on top of the PAM or the IAM or other tools implemented at the front door. So maybe you can comment on that statement. So
Silverfort, what we do best is we become kind of this identity ecosystem that sets after authentication. I like to say that we stop breaches, because we do. And unfortunately, a lot of times when these companies that we could go through the news and we could say, all these companies, they often make their first call to us afterwards, unfortunately, because we can even help them while they're under attack, because we have such great surveillance of identity and what's is going on. And so think about the problems that you have. I kind of touched on them very quickly, but these non-human identities and service accounts that you might have in your organization, what are they really doing? Has somebody, I used to authorize a service account, and then a week later it was being used for 5 other things I didn't even know about. Because people say, oh, well, I've got a service account, it's already got domain admin, we'll just use it for the script that goes out and inventories all the the machines, and we'll do this and we'll do that, and they hard code the password into a script, and they do all these other things. Like how are these things being used? How are they flowing? What are the real risks? Is there how do I know if something's changed and how they were used? How do I baseline them? How do I understand what normal is? All these things we can help you with. We can also help you both on the additional authentication. So putting an extra factor, after that initial authentication on these low-level interfaces, like, hey, if I open PowerShell, I'm going to get an MFA request first to validate that that's me and not some script on my machine. If it's some script on my machine, it's going to get blocked because it can't pass MFA. Or I'm going to deny you access. I'm going to deny that service account from logging in from my user VLAN. No one on my user VLAN can ever log into that service account. They have to be on this VLAN from this destination, from this machine going here. And so all these kinds of like use cases, that are pretty novel, but these are the ways that you really implement zero trust. And this is how you can implement the segmentation. And this is what Silverfort can really help you do. Even the things that we do now, I mean, the things that we're about to do are going to be really incredible, because we're going to begin to use things like, the risk engines and the capabilities of this identity ecosystem to change entitlements and change authorizations based on what's going on in real time. And so not just in policy-based stuff, but in risk-based stuff. And we can do some of that today, but things we're about to implement are going to be even cooler. And so these are all kinds of things that we can help you with. And we really help you get control of those non-human identities, which I think is a big issue, because there's so many of them, and with all the cloud and the hybrid stuff that's going on, it's gotten 1,000 times worse. So.
Thanks, JP. So if you could spend a minute or two on the second question before we wrap up the session. So the question is, what can IT security managers do to make their organizations stop concentrating on solving individual pieces of their security strategy puzzle and rather focus on the wide nature of identity security?
Hey, thanks, James, for that comment. Abhishek, that's an amazing question. What can we do? Well, we have to take ownership of it, and I think we have a lot of power in some ways in that we can redraw the picture. I'm an old architect at heart, and I always like to draw kind of the current state and the future state and the gap assessments and those kinds of things. And as you kind of think about those a little bit, how can we stop piecemealing it? Well, part of the reason we piecemeal it is because we don't have that effective strategy. We haven't put the roadmap either in place, that we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and getting the buy-in, getting the people in the management level to actually say, hey, we understand that roadmap, and it's going to take 2 years or 3 years, and you're going to do this year and this year and this year and it's showing that story, right, of why we need to do it. If it was me and I was sitting where you were, I literally was still John's idea a little bit, and this isn't like making myself great, but the question that I asked at the beginning, why are these companies getting breached? Why are all these great companies that have deployed all these security tools, who have done all this piecemeal stuff, why are they getting breached? Because if you ask that of your management team, you're going to get them to start to think. You're going to get them to start to wonder, why are they getting breached? Because they're like us. They've been doing all the things we've been doing. What was missing? What was the problem? And I think you can begin to turn it on its table. And how I talked about risk appetite. Abhishek, you can say, as a firm, what are we willing to tolerate? Are we willing to tolerate ransomware, going throughout our environment, locking all our machines down for a day, 2 days? Are we willing to be in the news that, they got in through an administrator account and they got access to our customer data? if we're not willing to do that, then let's talk about why that happens and begin to tell the story. Be a storyteller and be an architect and show through the story that vision of where we can be and how we can get there. And maybe stop trying to do the less important things, trade them off. If you can put identity security at the top again, if you can this way down here in most organizations, I know it is, because we found what we think we've solved it. We may not even be talking about identity. If we can put identity security back at the top and we can talk about it as being the issue and tell the story and lay out that roadmap of where we want to go and talk about it in business terms and risk appetite terms, kind of coming back to that, I think that's how you're going to get there. And I know it's not easy, but you got to start somewhere. And I think retell the story. In fact, it's okay to even admit that maybe some of the things we did didn't move the ball that much. It didn't fix that. It may be okay. I mean, to say that, but you don't have to dwell on mistakes of the past. Just give them the roadmap to the future. Talk about the evolution. Talk about AI. Talk about the threats that it faces. Talk about the need to shift left. That we need to respond quicker. Shift left on the MITRE attack curve. We need to respond quicker. We need to be able to do this with less people and more automation. We've got all these. As a CISO, and I'm sure as any security professional, if you ask me, like the things that keep me up at night, it's all my blind spots. Talk about the blind spots we have. Talk about the things we can't protect today. I can't protect you. Yes, I have all these tools and they do something. They do something important, but I can't protect you here. I can't protect you here. I can't protect you after they get in the front door, but I know how to protect you. And I think if you could tell that story, and maybe you can even use, partners, that can come along and help you. We could maybe help you tell that story. But if you can tell the story, I think you'll win the battle. You just have to get people to believe the story, because everybody likes a good story, and they like a happy ending. So give them a happy ending. Tell them where they can go with and make identity security great again. make it the thing that we're talking about, because it's a lot different. It's a lot true identity security, right? It's a lot different than what we've been doing.
Thanks, JP. We actually have one last question. I know we are running up to the hour. Terence has asked, are there any use cases where Silverfort can work alongside other identity vendors like RSA and CyberArk within an organization?
100%. 100%. In fact, we do that all the time. We come along like, a CyberArk PAM, right? Solution, and we wrap around it. We solve some of the problems that you can't get with the PAM, right? And give you some better intelligence into your identities, how they're being used, what happens after they leave the vault, what happens when they're being used in operational. So we come alongside of them. We don't throw them out. That's why I said, PAM might not be enough, but we definitely cohabitate with them. And there's a lot of great use cases. And we have some customers that, literally have implemented like hundreds of use cases, and a lot of them around like, the vaulting of identities and those kinds of things. So we can get into more detail. The sales teams can always come and talk through that with you, but it's definitely, we have partnerships with a lot of those companies, and we definitely commingle. We commingle very well. And if you think about it, here's the story. They got the front door, we got the back door, right? Right? The yin and the yang. We work together to solve the identity security problem.
Thanks, JP. I think that's a wrap for today's session. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and your participation and staying throughout this 1 hour. I hope this has been informative and beneficial to you, and we hope to see you in 2 to 3 months' time for our next Tech Talk. So thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Take care, and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you soon.